We have more now on our breaking news today. The Toronto Raptors have fired head coach Nick Nurse. The Raptors season ended just over a week ago with a loss to the Chicago Bulls in the NBA play-in tournament. Now, Toronto had 41 wins and 41 losses this past season. Raptors president Masai Ujiri spoke to reporters last hour and said he could see something was missing this year.
There was never that full excitement. There was never that full spirit. There was never that feel of like togetherness. We all saw it. You all saw it. It's not something we're making up here. We win 2, and then all of a sudden, like it goes another way. You seem like you're gaining, and then it goes another way. And it's not one person or one finger to point, and there's no pointing a finger at Nick. I have to take responsibility for this too. And as a leader of this organization, I will always do that. But it wasn't us. Yeah, this year wasn't us. I think everybody saw that.
Okay, so for more on this, I want to bring in Jay Rosales in Toronto. He's the co-host of the podcast That's a Wrap. He was, of course, listening into Masai Ujiri's press conference. He was listening along with us, and then he had a lot of other interviews to do, and now he's back with us. So, Jay, thank you for coming back with us. It's actually been a long time since we've had a chance to connect on this, and so I'm glad you could be here. You know, part of what we heard from Masai Ujiri there was that the team has looked very different in this past season compared to when we first had head coach Nick Nurse there. We know that Masai Ujiri is notorious for shaking things up. Did you see this coming?
I kind of did, and Arthi, it's great to speak with you again. There were signs of this heading into the final weeks of the season. During one of the final games of the season, the Raptors had a game against the Philadelphia 76ers, and after that game, Nick Nurse made some odd comments about wanting to reminisce on his time with the Raptors, talking about how he's been with the organization for 10 years, how he wanted to use this offseason to contemplate his future. Those kind of comments are the types of comments you would say at the end of the season, not while you're in the middle of a playoff race. So it was a bit odd. So the signs were kind of there that there was something bubbling under the surface. And this is kind of what it was. Masai Ujiri said that he's been talking to Nick Nurse over the last little while about his future, and ultimately this was the decision. And you mentioned it off the top. The Raptors were 41-41, which was a big disappointment considering they came off of a season where they overachieved at 48 wins last year and did some really good things in the playoffs. So it's unfortunate that this is the direction that the organization had to go through. And honestly, Nick Nurse has been amazing as a coach for the Raptors. So it'll be interesting to see, A, where he goes, because he will be a very sought after coach, but more importantly for Raptors fans, where does the organization go from here?
And it was interesting listening to the Raptors president talk about that, because essentially he said, we're going to see changes on all fronts. He didn't shy away from that. And again, like I mentioned before, he's sort of known for that, bringing in new energy. He said, we've got to build back spirit here. And he addressed that in the clip that we played right before connecting with you. And he said, it's vital to have that incredible energy. But he says, we don't need to sort of tear everything down to build it back. So how do you think we're going to see new energy be injected into this team? What do you think is going to change?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, that new energy he talks about, it also jives with what he was saying. I think he said the words fit and culture and togetherness so many times throughout this presser. So that will go very much into the planning on who they ultimately end up hiring. The first name that pops up is Ime Udoka. He is the former coach of the Boston Celtics. He led them to the finals just last year. There's obviously been a lot that's been going on behind the scenes with him. He had an affair with a Celtics organization staffer, which caused him to be fired. But from a coaching standpoint, he's an excellent coach. If we want to think about the culture that Masai wants to bring back, that he referenced multiple times, other names such as Patrick Mutombo or Jerry Stackhouse, both former assistants with the Raptors, are also names that have resurfaced. So those are the types of names that we're probably going to hear more about over the next little while. Masai never gave a deadline to when he wanted a new coach, but did indicate that by the time the draft happens, which is in approximately 2 months' time, that he should definitely have a coach in by that time.
So that does give a somewhat timeline, even though he didn't nail down a date. You know, you very clearly heard him say there that it would be good to have a head coach when we start the draft. That's for certain. You know, you want to have a cohesive team, and that's what he kind of outlined there. I do want to head back to Nick Nurse for a moment, because we know that, as you mentioned, during his tenure, there was a lot that happened for the Raptors, including, of course, the NBA championship win there. So what do you think the legacy will be for the team? And that might be the only time, I think, during the press conference that we saw a little bit of real Masai Ujiri when he was talking about Nick Nurse actually sitting down with the team.
Right. And I think his legacy will absolutely be that he was the coach of this championship winning team. And that championship banners live forever, right? They wave forever. So he will forever be tied to that, just as we've said the same with Kyle Lowry and Kawhi Leonard. They will always hold that space in Raptors lore. If we think about Nick Nurse's time even after that championship season, right? The following season, the Raptors were on their way to a possible second championship if COVID didn't hit. The third season was out of his control. That was the season where they were trapped in Tampa. And even last season, the first season with Scotty Barnes, that was not the type of season that the Raptors were supposed to do that well, but he managed to get a 48-win team out of there. So if we look at his coaching tenure, at least his head coaching tenure as a whole, he was very successful as a Raptors head coach. He will go down as the greatest Raptors coach in franchise history until those numbers get passed. But that's where his legacy currently sits and where it will reside for a very long time.
Well, there's a lot to come on this story. We know that for certain. Thank you for joining us today, Jay. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Artie.
Jay Rosales in Toronto. He is the co-host of the podcast That's a Wrap.